Hostile in ways that a surface dweller could never know, the tunnel mazes of the Underdark challenge all who tread there. Among these souls are Drizzt Do'Urden and his magical cat, Guinevere. Exiled from his drow homeland, Drizzt must fight for a new home in the Boundless Labyrinth. Meanwhile, he must watch for signs of pursuit, for the Dark Elves are not a forgiving race. Exile by Ra Salvatore is the second book in the Dark Elf Trilogy, which is the prequel novels that start off the Legend of Drizzt series. So if you are interested in starting the huge Legend of Drizzt series, then you definitely want to start with these prequel novels. They're officially listed as books 1, 2, and 3 now, so really they are the definitive place to start. I made a video review for the first book, Homeland, which I'll leave a link to down below. However, I don't exactly recommend watching that video because it is one of my older videos, and at that time, my autofocus was just all over the place. This story begins 10 years after the events of Homeland, and Drizzt has exiled himself from the subterranean drow city of Menzoberranzan. He is now surviving in the Underdark, which is a pretty perilous place to try and survive. At the beginning of this book, Drizzt Do'Urden, the Dark Elf protagonist, is living in a small cavern neighboring these fungus men, and he is just trying to survive in the Underdark, where there are countless amounts of deadly creatures. Now, back in Menzoberranzan, the Do'Urden family are at war with the Hunit family, thanks to the help of a new character called Jarlaxle. And Jarlaxle is this bald Dark Elf. He's actually the leader of this band of mercenaries, and he's actually quite the funny character. You're going to be seeing him a lot more throughout this series. So the Do'Urden family are trying to make their way up the ranks of the Drow Elf society. However, there comes a point where they basically find out that to please their Spider Queen Lolth, they must basically track down their son, Drizzt Do'Urden, and kill him. Now, at this point in time, when Drizzt is trying to survive in the Underdark, he has kind of lost a part of himself because he is incredibly alone. And if you know anything about Drizzt, throughout this entire series, what makes up his adventures is his time with his friends. And at this point in time, he doesn't have any friends except for Guinevere. Guinevere is his panther companion that lives in a different realm. However, it can be called forth from this little statue of a panther. Surviving in the Underdark has taken a huge toll on Drizzt. He's starting to become this primal hunter, this animal, and he's losing some of his humanity. I know he's not human, but you get what I mean. This book begins that depth of character in Drizzt that kind of stretches beyond fantasy. You do not see this in many fantasy novels. And really, throughout the entire series, Drizzt always has this need to belong and to have friendship, and this is kind of what we see the most in this book. Now, Drizzt's isolation is something I believe many readers are going to be able to relate to. He has just gone through a tremendous amount of pain. His father and his mentor and his friend, Zaknafine, was murdered. I believe the description of his loneliness is something that you can relate to in real life, whether you're going through a breakup or whether somebody you love died. It's that kind of emptiness and that yearning for something. In that sense, I think that this book is a very important one in this series. I do kind of feel like it is the weaker one out of the 3 prequel novels, but even though it's the weaker one, I still had no complaints, really. I really enjoyed this book. I just think the other 2 are better, but this one is still a fantastic book. When Drizzt is almost at the pinnacle of his loneliness, he does end up befriending some very unlikely friends who are also outcast. The first one is Belwar, who is a gray-skinned deep gnome who had his hands cut off from a drow raiding party, and his hands were replaced with a pickaxe. His hands were replaced with a pickaxe and a magical hammer. And the deep gnomes are mortal enemies to the drow elves, so it's very unlikely that they find friendship, but they do, and they become some of the best of friends. And the other friend he meets in this book is Clacker, and Clacker is a interesting character. So Clacker used to be part of the Peck race, and Pecks are this peaceful race that mine rocks and they can listen to the stone. But sadly, he was polymorphed by an evil mage into a hook horror. And because of this transformation, he begins to get these instincts from the hook horror, and it starts to push out the peaceful peck mind that he has. And this can kind of be related to Drizzt, how Drizzt was getting those hunter instincts when he was alone and almost becoming animal. But these 3 very unlikely friends end up finding solitude with each other and gaining each other's trust and trying to help each other through these moments. Now, they also have to face some very scary monsters in the Underdark, one of which being the Illithid, and the Illithid are the Cthulhu-like race that are tentacle-faced, and they can mind control people. They're also known as mind flayers. Not to mention, Drizzt is being hunted by his family. Drizzt is one of my all-time favorite characters I have read in literature, and this fantasy series is probably one of my favorites in high and epic fantasy, and I highly recommend it to anybody who is interested in reading fantasy, because it is just such a fantastic series. So if you like this review and want to see more like it, please subscribe. I'm going to be reviewing Sojourn soon, which is the third book in the Dark Elf Trilogy, and that is probably one of my favorite, actually, in all the Drizzt books that I've read so far. Oh, and also, you may have noticed my new Link watercolor painting that my cousin painted for me that fits perfectly between my bookshelves, and it is just so beautiful. Also, it glows in the dark, so I won't be scared at night. I'll make sure to bring it with me if I ever venture forth into the Underdark.